There's a particular kind of person whose anger doesn't just surface, it erupts. Their rage isn't proportional to what triggered it. A small comment becomes a screaming match. A minor inconvenience becomes a door-slamming explosion. A simple disagreement transforms into personal attacks, threats, and sometimes violence. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of this kind of anger, you know it's not just uncomfortable, it's genuinely frightening. You watch someone you thought you knew transform into a completely different person. Their face changes, their voice shifts, their entire energy becomes dangerous. And when it's over, when they've burned through their rage, they might apologize, they might cry, they might promise it won't happen again. But somehow, it always does. Because people who can't control their anger aren't experiencing occasional emotional outbursts. They're caught in a psychological pattern that runs much deeper than a bad mood or a stressful day. Understanding the psychology behind uncontrolled anger starts with understanding what's happening inside the brain during these explosive moments. Because anger, at its core, is a neurological event as much as it is an emotional one. When someone experiences rage, their amygdala, the brain's alarm system, becomes hyperactive. This small, almond-shaped structure deep in the brain is responsible for processing threats and triggering the fight-or-flight response. In a normal anger response, the prefrontal cortex, which handles rational thinking and emotional regulation, can moderate the amygdala's reaction. It's like a conversation between two parts of the brain, one saying, "This is a threat," and the other saying, "Let's think about this rationally." But in people who can't control their anger, this conversation breaks down. The amygdala fires so intensely that it essentially hijacks the entire system. The prefrontal cortex, which would normally provide restraint and perspective, goes offline. This is why people in the grip of rage often say things like, "I blacked out," or "I don't even remember what I did." Their rational mind genuinely wasn't in control. The primitive, reactive part of their brain took over completely. This is called an amygdala hijack, and it can happen to anyone under extreme stress. But for people with chronic anger issues, the threshold for this hijack is incredibly low. What would barely register as an annoyance for most people triggers a full neurological crisis for them. A traffic delay, a perceived slight, someone disagreeing with them. These minor events activate the same brain response that should be reserved for actual threats to survival. But here's the critical question. Why? Why do some people's brains react this way while others can experience the same situations without exploding? The answer often lies in childhood, in the early years when our brains are still learning how to process and regulate emotions. Children learn emotional regulation primarily through two mechanisms: modeling and co-regulation. They watch the adults around them handle frustration, disappointment, and anger, and they internalize those patterns. They also rely on caregivers to help them calm down when overwhelmed, teaching their nervous systems how to return to baseline after emotional activation. When a child grows up in an environment where anger is the primary emotional currency, where problems are solved through yelling, intimidation, or violence, they learn that this is how emotions work. They don't develop the neural pathways for other responses because they've never seen them modeled. When their parent explodes over minor issues, screams during disagreements, or uses anger to control situations, the child's brain learns this is normal. This is how you express frustration. This is how you get your needs met. Even more significantly, if a child's emotions were consistently dismissed, minimized, or punished, if they were told, "Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about," if their fear was mocked, their sadness was ignored, they learned that most emotions are unacceptable. But anger? Anger is often the one emotion that gets attention, that creates change, that makes people listen. So anger becomes the default setting for all emotional experiences. Sadness becomes anger, fear becomes anger, vulnerability becomes anger. It's the only emotional language they were allowed to speak. This creates adults who genuinely don't know how to process emotions any other way. They're not choosing rage, they're experiencing every negative feeling through the only channel they developed. And because they never learned to identify different emotions or regulate their intensity, everything feels like a crisis. Everything demands an immediate, intense response. But there's another dimension to chronic anger that goes beyond childhood conditioning, the psychological function that anger serves. For many people who can't control their rage, anger isn't just an emotional reaction, it's a tool, a defense mechanism, a way of managing internal experiences that feel even more threatening than the anger itself. Underneath most rage is fear. Fear of being disrespected, fear of losing control, fear of being vulnerable, fear of feeling powerless. And anger, in the moment, feels powerful. It creates the illusion of control. When you're screaming, when you're dominating a space, when people are backing away from you, you feel big, you feel in charge, you feel like nothing can hurt you. This is particularly true for people with fragile egos or narcissistic tendencies. For these individuals, anything that threatens their self-image, criticism, boundaries, someone disagreeing with them, being told no, creates what psychologists call narcissistic injury. Their entire sense of self feels under attack. And because they lack the internal resources to tolerate this feeling, they respond with rage. The anger isn't about the situation itself, it's about defending against the unbearable feeling of being imperfect, being wrong, or being ordinary. This is why such people often explode over things that seem absurdly minor to observers. You forgot to pick up milk? Rage. You arrived 5 minutes late? Rage. You expressed a different opinion? Rage. To everyone else, these are small issues, but to someone whose self-worth is constantly under threat, these moments represent challenges to their control, their importance, their rightness, and they cannot tolerate that feeling. There's also a physiological component that reinforces the anger cycle. When someone explodes in rage, their body floods with adrenaline and cortisol. Their heart rate spikes, their muscles tense. They feel intensely alive and powerful in that moment. And then, after the explosion, after they've yelled or thrown things or slammed doors, there's a release. The pressure dissipates. They feel calmer. This creates a problematic reward cycle. The anger provides temporary relief from whatever uncomfortable feeling was underneath it. The explosion releases the physical tension, and the brain, at a very basic level, learns anger works. Anger makes the bad feeling go away. So the next time discomfort arises, the brain reaches for anger even more quickly. The threshold lowers. The explosions become more frequent and more intense. And here's what makes this particularly difficult for people who have to deal with someone else's uncontrolled anger. The person raging often feels completely justified. In their mind, in that moment, they're not overreacting. They're responding appropriately to what they perceive as a genuine threat or injustice. Their anger feels righteous, deserved, necessary. This is why such people often apologize from chronically angry people, often ring hollow. They might feel genuine remorse after the explosion when their prefrontal cortex comes back online and they realize how they acted. But because they felt justified in the moment, because the anger served a psychological function they needed, the pattern doesn't change. The next time they feel threatened or uncomfortable or out of control, the same response will trigger, because nothing has fundamentally shifted in their nervous system or their psychological framework. So, what are the signs that someone's anger has crossed from normal frustration into a serious psychological issue? First, disproportionate reactions. If someone goes from calm to explosive with no middle ground, if minor irritations trigger the same response as major problems, that's a red flag. Anger should generally be proportional to the situation. When it's not, when someone screams about a parking spot the same way they might react to actual danger, their emotional regulation system is fundamentally impaired. Second, frequent explosions. Everyone has bad days. Everyone occasionally loses their temper. But if someone is exploding multiple times a week, if rage is their primary emotional state, if people around them are constantly walking on eggshells trying not to trigger an outburst, that's not normal stress. That's a pattern. Third, inability to calm down. Most people, even when very angry, can eventually regulate themselves. They might need space, they might need to vent, but they can return to baseline. People with serious anger issues often can't. They stay activated for hours. They ruminate on the perceived offense. They bring it up repeatedly. They can't let it go. Fourth, blame externalization. Healthy anger involves taking some responsibility. "I'm frustrated because this situation isn't working" is very different from "you made me angry. This is all your fault. You're the reason I reacted this way." People who can't control their anger almost never take responsibility for their reactions. Everything is always someone else's fault. They were made to yell. They were forced to react. They're always the victim of circumstances or other people's actions. Fifth, escalating aggression. Anger that starts with yelling but progresses to throwing things, punching walls, getting physically close or intimidating, threatening harm. This is anger that's becoming dangerous. And contrary to the myth that letting it out helps, research shows that people who regularly express anger through physical aggression actually become more aggressive over time, not less. The behavior reinforces itself. Sixth, no genuine remorse or change. As mentioned earlier, apologies without behavioral change are meaningless. If someone repeatedly explodes, apologizes, promises to change, and then does the exact same thing again, their remorse isn't deep enough to motivate actual work on the problem. They're sorry they hurt you, but they're not sorry enough to do the difficult work of changing their patterns. So, if you're dealing with someone who can't control their anger, what can you actually do? First, understand that you cannot fix them. This is crucial. No amount of walking on eggshells, managing their emotions for them, or trying to avoid triggering them will solve the problem. Their anger is their responsibility, and only they can choose to address it. Your job is not to manage their emotions. Your job is to protect yourself. Second, set clear boundaries and enforce them consistently. This might sound like, "I'm willing to have this conversation when we can both stay calm. If you start yelling, I will leave the room." And then, critically, you follow through every time. Angry people are used to their rage working, used to people backing down or giving in to avoid the explosion. When you consistently refuse to engage with the rage, when you remove yourself from the situation every single time they escalate, you're communicating that this behavior will not achieve what they want. Third, don't argue during the explosion. When someone is in the grip of rage, their prefrontal cortex is offline. Trying to reason with them, defend yourself, or explain your perspective is completely pointless. They cannot hear you. They're in fight or flight mode, and the rational part of their brain is not accessible. Any attempt to engage will only escalate the situation. Your best response is to disengage entirely. Leave the room, leave the house if necessary. Create physical distance until they've calmed down. Fourth, document patterns if the situation is serious. If you're in a relationship with someone whose anger is frightening or escalating, keep records. Note dates, times, what triggered the explosion, what they said or did. This serves two purposes. It helps you see the pattern clearly, because angry people often gaslight, claiming things weren't that bad or didn't happen. And it provides documentation if you eventually need to involve authorities or seek legal protection. Fifth, recognize when anger has become abuse. Not all anger is abuse, but anger that's used to control, intimidate, or harm absolutely is. If someone's rage makes you feel unsafe, if you're changing your behavior out of fear, if they're using anger to get their way or punish you, that's emotional abuse. And it often escalates. Anger that starts with yelling can progress to thrown objects, to punched walls, to physical violence. If you feel afraid, trust that instinct. Finally, prioritize your own safety and well-being. You cannot love someone into changing. You cannot be patient enough or understanding enough to fix someone else's anger problem. If someone with serious anger issues isn't actively working on the problem, and I mean genuinely in therapy, doing anger management, taking full responsibility for their behavior, then nothing will change. And you have to decide whether you're willing to live with that reality or whether you need to protect yourself by leaving. Because here's the difficult truth. Most people with serious anger problems never change. Change requires acknowledging the problem, taking full responsibility, doing difficult psychological work, and probably addressing deep childhood wounds and trauma. It requires humility, commitment, and sustained effort over years. And many people who can't control their anger lack the insight or motivation to do this work. They don't see their anger as the problem. They see other people as the problem. They see circumstances as the problem. And if someone doesn't believe they need to change, they won't, no matter how much you want them to, no matter how much potential you see in them, no matter how good things are when they're not angry. The pattern will continue, and you have to decide whether you're willing to accept that or whether you deserve better. Understanding the psychology behind uncontrolled anger doesn't mean excusing it, doesn't mean tolerating it. It means recognizing that this is a serious psychological issue that requires professional intervention. It means seeing the behavior for what it is, not a personality quirk or a passionate temperament, but a fundamental inability to regulate emotions that often stems from deep psychological wounds or neurological patterns. If you're the person struggling with anger, the most important thing you can do is acknowledge it, not minimize it, not blame others for triggering it, but own it fully. Your anger is your responsibility. The work of changing it is your work to do. And yes, that work is hard. It means therapy. It means learning to identify emotions before they become rage. It means sitting with uncomfortable feelings instead of exploding. It means addressing whatever pain or fear is underneath the anger. But it's possible. People can learn emotional regulation even if they never learned it as children. Brains can develop new patterns. Nervous systems can be retrained. It requires commitment, support, and time, but it can be done. And if you're dealing with someone else's uncontrolled anger, remember this. Their anger is about them, not you. You didn't cause it. You can't fix it. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your safety, your peace, your well-being. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for them, is to establish clear boundaries or walk away entirely. Because everyone deserves to live without fear. Everyone deserves relationships where anger is expressed healthily, where conflicts are resolved without explosions, where emotional safety is maintained. And no one should have to shrink themselves, silence themselves, or live in constant tension just to avoid triggering someone else's rage. That's not a relationship. That's survival. And you deserve so much more than that.